So that would tell you that, to me, it was very disappointing, the movie. Not necessarily his fault.
There's a moment in sports where you can feel an entire match shift, not because of a brilliant shot or a tactical adjustment, but because of something much harder to define. Wednesday night in Linz, Austria gave us one of those moments. And if you blinked, if you looked away for even 30 seconds, you missed the thing that actually decided this match. Alex Ostapenko versus Alexandra Eala. On paper, a round of 16 clash on clay between a former Grand Slam champion and a 20-year-old from the Philippines who has been quietly turning the tennis world upside down. What unfolded was something far more interesting than a tennis match. It was a masterclass in psychological warfare, and the person who delivered it has been doing this her entire career, while most people called it something else entirely. Let's go back to the beginning, because context here is everything. Eala didn't arrive in Linz as some nervous wild card hoping to steal a set. She came in ranked 46th in the world, fresh off one of the most electric breakthrough seasons women's tennis has seen in years. In 2025, at the Miami Open, she walked in as a wild card and walked out having beaten Alexandra Ostapenko, Madison Keys, and Iga Swiatek back-to-back. Swiatek, the world #1, the most dominant clay court player of her generation. Eala beat her. She trained at the Rafa Nadal Academy. Mats Wilander, a man who won 7 Grand Slams, compared her tennis intelligence to John McEnroe. That's not a compliment people throw around casually. So when she took the court in Linz, she wasn't intimidated. And for most of that match, she was the better player. The first set stayed relatively balanced early on. Both players holding serve, finding their range, feeling each other out. Then Eala began tilting the baseline exchanges in her direction, and a clean break gave her a 4-2 lead over a top 25 Grand Slam champion on clay, which is supposed to be Ostapenko's best surface. That's a statement. Ostapenko responded the way she always does, with flat, heavy ground strokes that compress time and take the racket out of your hands before you've even decided what to do with it. She broke back, rattled off 4 straight games, and closed the first set 6-4. Momentum swing, player raises her level, that's tennis. Nothing alarming yet. But then the second set started, and that's where this story stops being a conventional tennis match. Eala came back out transformed. Whatever she adjusted between sets worked immediately. 4 straight games to open. 2 clean service breaks. Ostapenko was leaking double faults, her body language getting heavier with every lost point, and at 5-1, the match looked done. Not mathematically finished, sure, but anyone who watches tennis knows what 5-1 feels like. The crowd inside Design Center Linz, a crowd heavy with Filipino fans who had traveled to support Eala, was already celebrating. And then something happened that had nothing to do with tennis. At 1-4, 15-40, the most pressurized moment of Ostapenko's evening, she stopped. She turned away from the baseline, completely away, and faced the crowd. Not a glance over her shoulder, not a frustrated look. She extended her racket toward a specific person in the stands and verbally challenged him to come down and play in her place if he thought he could do better. She then called over a tournament official, pointed toward the section, and made clear she wanted something done about it. The whole sequence lasted under 2 minutes. What happened after those 2 minutes is the entire story. Ostapenko won every single remaining game. 6 straight. The 5-1 lead that had felt like a closed door disappeared completely. Eala couldn't hold serve, couldn't convert on returns, couldn't find the rhythm she'd spent 40 minutes building. Final score, 6-4, 7-5 to Ostapenko. Now here's the thing. John McEnroe was watching. And John McEnroe did not stay quiet. He went off. And the reason his reaction matters isn't because he's a famous commentator with opinions. It's because McEnroe spent the better part of his career being accused of doing the exact same thing. The confrontations with officials, the arguments with linespeople, the moments that dragged matches into strange psychological territory, nobody understood better than McEnroe where the line between genuine frustration and calculated disruption actually sits. And when he watched Ostapenko work through that sequence, he didn't see a player boiling over emotionally. He saw a player making a choice. There's a massive difference between those two things, and it's a difference most people watching at home simply aren't trained to spot. McEnroe is. And his reaction, his genuine discomfort with what he witnessed, should have been the story the tennis world sat with for more than a news cycle. Instead it got a shrug, a scoreline, and everyone moved on. Here's what makes the Linz moment feel less like an isolated incident and more like a recurring pattern. Ostapenko's relationship with electronic line calling has been a talking point among opponents for years. She challenges calls at a frequency that goes well past what the numbers would justify. Opponents describe it as disruptive regardless of whether the challenge succeeds, because the disruption was never really about the call. It's about the pause, the break in rhythm, the moment where your opponent has to stop, wait, reset, and try to find the thread of what they were doing. Whether that habit is deliberate or just deeply ingrained doesn't actually change its effect. And then there's the number that stops every conversation dead. Ostapenko is 6-0 against Iga Swiatek. 6 times they've played. Swiatek has never beaten her. Swiatek, who has dominated clay court tennis for years, who won the French Open multiple times, who is by any measurable standard the best player of her generation, has never once managed to get over the line against Ostapenko. No clean statistical breakdown fully explains that. Raw talent alone doesn't explain it. Surface preference doesn't explain it. Something specific happens in those matches, some psychological dimension that Ostapenko operates in that makes her uniquely capable of destabilizing exactly the kind of opponent who should be too mentally strong to destabilize. Entering Linz, Ostapenko's 2026 season was 9-8. Decent but nothing special. But look closer at where those wins came from and a shape starts to emerge. The victories arrived disproportionately in matches against higher-ranked opponents, in matches that featured extended stoppages, conversations with officials, and disruptions to the natural flow of the game. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The final statistics from Wednesday seemed straightforward at first. Ostapenko hit 41 winners. Eala hit 9. On the surface that reads as total domination by the more powerful player. But dig one layer deeper and the numbers tell a completely different story. Almost all of those 41 winners came in the final 6 games of the match. During the stretch where Eala was leading 4-0 and extending to 5-1, Ostapenko wasn't hitting winners. She was making errors. She was struggling. The winner count is a snapshot of what happened after the crowd confrontation, not a picture of the whole match. What those numbers actually show is a player who was losing, who manufactured a moment, and who then performed at a completely different level once that moment had done what it needed to do to her opponent's concentration. Eala is 20 years old. She had never played Ostapenko on clay before Wednesday night. She had no roadmap for navigating a manufactured disruption from a player who has spent years learning exactly when and how to use one. That gap, not the gap in ground stroke power, is what the final scoreline was actually measuring. And it's worth pausing on what this loss means within the bigger picture of where Eala is in her career, because the stakes here are real. She's not just a promising young player padding her ranking. She's the first player from the Philippines to ever reach the WTA Top 100. Every match she plays carries weight that goes far beyond the draw sheet. The Filipino fans who follow her across tournaments, who fill sections of crowds at events across Europe, who are loud and proud inside that arena in Linz, they're part of something that didn't exist in women's tennis before she arrived. That energy, that presence, that noise, it's an asset almost every time. In Linz on Wednesday, it may have handed Ostapenko exactly the trigger she was looking for. Now, was what Ostapenko did cheating? That's the question that lingers, and it deserves a precise answer rather than an emotional one. She broke no rules. Confronting a spectator is not a code violation. Requesting official intervention is not a code violation. Taking time between points to address crowd behavior is permitted under WTA rules. Everything she did was technically legal. But McEnroe's point, and he made it with the full weight of his own history behind it, is that legal and sporting aren't the same category. Something can sit entirely within the rulebook and still be a deliberate manipulation of competitive conditions. The gray area is real, it's been there his whole career, and Ostapenko operates in it as comfortably as she operates on a clay baseline. The harder question is whether Eala was equipped to handle it. And honestly, how could she have been? You can prepare for powerful ground strokes. You can prepare for aggressive net approaches and heavy topspin and flat driving returns. You don't prepare for the moment a more experienced player weaponizes the crowd, the officials, and the entire atmosphere of a match against you at the precise second you think it's already over. That's not in any coaching manual. That's something you only learn by living through it. And now Eala has lived through it. That matters more than the loss. Ostapenko moves on to the Linz quarterfinals and then into Stuttgart, where she's the defending champion. Roland Garros is on the horizon. Her clay season has momentum now, built on this result, and she'll carry it forward with the quiet confidence of someone who knows exactly what she's capable of when the pressure reaches its highest point. Eala heads to Stuttgart 2, into a main draw opened up by Qin Wenjing's withdrawal. Madrid follows. The Italian Open follows. An entire clay swing stretches out ahead of her, and she'll face it with something she didn't have before Wednesday night: direct experience of Ostapenko's full toolkit. The head-to-head stands at 2-1 in Eala's favor. She still leads this rivalry. The next time these two meet, whether it's on clay or grass or hard court, Eala will not be caught in that same position. She'll recognize the moment. She'll have a response ready. She'll know what it looks like when an experienced opponent stops playing tennis and starts playing something else entirely. McEnroe saw it from the commentary booth and said something. Eala saw it from the baseline and felt it. The question going forward is whether the rest of the tennis world is paying close enough attention to understand what it actually means when it happens again. Because it will happen again. And when it does, this match in Linz is the one you'll want to have understood first.